being a chef isn't just a job. It is a huge part of your life, and that's just the way it goes. But you wouldn't change anything for the world. But it is just I've learned to prioritize my time very well.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. There is a wonderful renaissance of brasseries in recent years in Sydney, a side of hospitality where traditional pastry and desserts have flourished in the past. But in the new world of brasseries, what is the approach with desserts? Rhiann Mead is the head pastry chef of the Charles Grand Brasserie and Bar in Sydney. Rhiann, how are you?
Hello, good, thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's great to get you on the show. You're part of a really exciting grand establishment. How are things going at the moment?
Things at the Charles are great. Almost a year in now, so we've definitely found our feet. And it's just a very exciting time in terms of what we're creating and sort of everything that's going on there.
Tell us a little bit about your role. Brasseries of the past have had, real key components have been traditional desserts, but what's been your approach here?
My approach is it's classic. I think that my training, my style is very sort of classic and traditional, but then it's also that sort of push for sort of a bit of a modern twist to it. So I'm trying to do the classic desserts, but also have a lot of technique and a lot of sort of different skills shown in what we do there.
Tell us about your role at the moment. Do you have a license to do whatever you want, or is it in consultation with the executive chef? What's the process there in regards to desserts?
So this is the first role I've had, which is sort of where I have full control, which is really nice and scary at the same time. But me and the head chef, Dilly, we work closely together just with coming up with ideas, and it's very sort of cohesive between pastry and main section as well. But yeah, it's sort of very exciting to just be sort of supported and encouraged to do whatever I think of, obviously as long as it's in line with what we do. But it's, very exciting.
We've seen a few brasseries open up lately, which is amazing, and I love to see that. But tell us a little bit about the Charles and what you guys are doing there.
Yeah. So Charles is a European-style brasserie. We offer menus from breakfast through to dinner, and we have an afternoon tea selection there as well. So that's the great thing. You can come in any point of the day, whatever you feel like, whether it just be a petit four and coffee, a light lunch, afternoon tea. You can sort of come in for anything. And then I guess my main focus there is we have the dessert trolley, which is pretty exciting. It's great when you walk in and you just see this dessert trolley piled up, going around the restaurant. You just see everyone's faces sort of light up in the excitement. And so that's sort of the main focus for me.
Tell us about the dessert trolley. Is there a tendency to want to wow people with the look of it as opposed to how do you get that balance of a great dessert?
Definitely. I think the way I see things is people eat with their eyes before they even look at a menu. So the dessert trolley has to be visually impressive. But then it's always my belief that it has to look as good as it tastes, and vice versa. One can't outweigh the other. So when we create things for the dessert trolley, it's a long process trying to make things look visually stunning, but also taste just as good as they look.
Well, I want to explore sort of what you're doing there and maybe a few dishes in detail a bit later on. But take us back to when you were young. Where did you grow up, and what sort of role did food play for you?
So I grew up in a small country town called Toowoomba up in Queensland. And food, I grew up in a big family, and food was always something that brought us together. All the aunts and uncles and cousins. Anytime we came together, it was usually grandma cooking a big feast for everyone. And I think food always had a big part in my life, but I never really considered to have a career out of it. And then sort of the older I got, I was enrolled for physiotherapy at university, and I deferred for a year. Yeah, completely different. Deferred for a year because I wanted to get out of Toowoomba and explore the world a little bit. And I ended up in London. That was the first place I went. ran out of money pretty quickly, and I got a retail job in the Harrod's food hall. And I think coming from a small country town, sort of the fanciest chocolate you get there was maybe Lindt, and so I think going over somewhere over to Europe where chocolate and patisserie is such a huge appreciated sort of craft, it was like a whole new world had been opened up to me, and I really fell in love with sort of pastry and chocolate, and I knew I wanted to sort of pursue a career in that. And then so there was a chef in the food hall. He had a concession, William Curley, and I just fell in love with everything that he did, and I just harassed him every time he came in. Eventually he gave in and took me on as an apprentice. And so that's sort of where my love for patisserie started.
Before we get into that sort of world of Harrods and your immersion into pastry, what was it like for you? You know, what was life like in London for you, having grown up in Toowoomba? Was it a bit of a shock?
Yeah, it was a huge shock. It was just completely sort of life-changing. Everything was different growing up in somewhere where the road I lived on was a dirt road. We had horses that we used to ride down to the creek. And then being in London, I just turned 18. It was, it was an amazing experience, but it took me a long time to adjust.
You mentioned Harrods and diving into that world. Take us in there. What was it like at first when you started sort of working with pastry and learning things? What were the real sort of moments for you?
I think especially the world of chefing was always quite glamorized on TV and sort of movies. So I think the biggest shock was sort of the lifestyle change you need to make. But that comes with it, you know, like the job that you do as a chef sort of becomes your life and you love doing it. So adjusting to the hours was something that I definitely had to get used to. But it was just so exciting. I remember the first day I had in the kitchen, William's wife, Suzu, was showing us how to do chocolate flowers. And it was all part of this massive sculpture that went on. Everything was just sort of mind-blowing and incredible. It was so exciting. Even making a caramel was exciting. It was...
Harrod's food hall is extraordinary. For those that have never been there, give us a sense of what it's like in the whole food hall.
I feel like it's sort of like almost walking into like a Harry Potter world. Like there's so much going on. There's so many different stalls, and it's just piles or mountains of chocolates and cakes, and it's just incredible the amount of produce that they have there, and just the incredible sort of range of anything you want you can find there pretty much. And so going into work there every day was also just so exciting. It was, you'd find something new each day, or you'd be inspired by something. It's a very, very incredible place. Every time I go back to London, it's always one of my first places to visit, just because it has such a special, it just brings that excitement out.
Pastry is such an exacting science. Do you have any stories of what it was like for you in the early days, trying to get things right and making errors and then sort of finding your way?
Yeah, I think I've probably made as many mistakes as I have done things right. But I think I've always been quite a perfectionist, and sort of that precision has always been within me. So I think I was naturally just drawn to pastry for that reason. But I always think the big mistakes you make are always the ones that you learn from, and then you learn never to do them again. I remember my first day trying to make a caramel. I dipped my finger in to see whether it was hot enough. So that was a big mistake I learned. But nothing too major, so it's not too bad.
What were the sort of things that you were making there at Harrod's with William Curley?
So William's really famous for his chocolates. So that was a huge part of it. We do lots of couture chocolate, chocolate bars, a few sculptures here and there. But then he also had a side of patisserie. So we do lots of individual patisseries, large cakes. But then probably the most exciting part was on weekends, he used to do a dessert bar. So it was the first place in London to do this. This would have been 10 years ago. And it was 5 courses of desserts. And I was usually the chef there on the weekends doing that. So that was really fun. And I think that sort of was what introduced me to the service sort of side of the chef world. And I absolutely fell in love with that. Getting to interact with customers, played up in front of people. It was really fun.
What brought you back to Australia?
I ran out of visa options. I think if I would probably still be there, I think, if things were different. But yeah, I ran out of visa options after about 5 years. Couldn't really find another way to stay. And so came back to Australia. And I think it was definitely the best decision I've made. I'm so happy being back. I went back home for, might have been about 3 months, and I couldn't last any longer. It was just life seemed so slow and there wasn't a lot going on. So then I just moved to Sydney, and I was applying around for jobs. There's some amazing pastry chefs in Sydney, but I think it was around the time when Peter Gilmore's first cookbook came out, and I was absolutely obsessed with it. So I applied there thinking I would never get a job, just because I'd nenever worked in a restaurant, and especially somewhere like Key. And then I got a call back and went in for a trial and got the job. It was great.
Well, you spent quite a bit of time in the Fink Group. Tell us about the experiences you had and how you rose the ranks there.
I had the best time working between both Key and Bennelong. It's about 7 years in total. And it was such a fantastic time. The team there is incredible. I feel like I've had some really, really good influences who've sort of helped me with my career, guided along. But yeah, I started as a demi chef back before Key got renovated, and it was crazy times. We were doing huge numbers. There was a lot going on, and I think that was a great way to sort of learn how to manage a service and how to sort of control those numbers, how to delegate. So yeah, really, really happy memories from that time. And then moving over to Bennelong, that was my first head pastry chef role. And that was, I loved Bennelong. I've got nothing but good things to say about my time working there. It's very special to me. And yeah, that was even bigger of a beast. That was, sometimes we'd do about 200 covers a night. And it was great to sort of learn how to maintain that 2-hat quality and standard while working under the pressure of those numbers.
Tell us about that head pastry chef role there. What did it encompass?
So the head pastry chef role there is maintaining, like I just said, maintaining the service and the standard that we had there. And this was a really special time for me. I was working quite closely with Peter Gilmore and developing these incredible ideas that he had. And spending months creating recipes and methods to try and make them work. It was a really, really great time.
Well, Bennelong's renowned for some of the most incredible desserts that have featured on the covers of magazines and look like the Opera House and all sorts of things like that. Tell us about some of the desserts that you guys created there that you have the most fond memories of.
Well, I do love doing the pavlova. I think it's just iconic. That's the one that everyone sort of orders when they come in. Doing that was really, really fun. I think the one that's most special to me is the chocolate crackle. That was something that I got to work on with Pete a lot. So I think that one probably took about 3-4 months in total, trying to figure out a way to individually cover the grains of rice with chocolate, still have them shiny. There was so many steps and components to it. And it was just a very sort of proud moment when that dish was completed. And it's still on the menu now, which is great. And it's just it's a beautiful dish. But when you see how much work goes into it, pretty incredible.
Peter Gilmore is a legend of the Australian hospitality sector. Do you have any stories of what he's actually like to work with?
Oh, Peter's fantastic. He's very, very inspirational. It's just, I wish that my mind could work the way that his mind works. He just thinks everything through in such amazing detail. And he'd come to me with these ideas. And in my head, I was like, there's no way that this is going to work. It's not possible. And he's just sort of great at motivating and sort of positively pushing you to make it happen. And it's things that I thought were impossible that he's just a genius. And you'd always find a way to make it work and make it exactly how he'd imagined it.
Desserts have such an impact on the dining experience. It's often the last thing that people experience when they dine out. What is it that lured you to a job in pastry? What do you love about it?
I think for me, it's exactly what you've just said, how it's the last thing that you remember when you go out for a meal. Or I feel like a cake or something sweet is something you always give to someone, whether it be a celebration, and I'm sorry. I feel like everyone always sort of speaks through food, and it always seems to be dessert, which is what people fall or tend to go towards. So for me, I feel like it's a very special way to connect with people without sounding too lame. But I feel like it's a very special part, and it makes people happy.
How did the opportunity at the Charles come about for you?
So that came about, I was just talking to Billy, and he got me to come in and have a chat. And just the idea of what they were planning to do with the Charles was just so exciting. I feel like this is the first sort of venue I've come across that has both something like the dessert trolley and an a la carte service. And so that for me was perfect, because I love sort of the production side of pastry, but then I also love the service side of a restaurant. So for me, this is sort of the best of both worlds. You get to have both, and just the possibilities to be creative are pretty much just endless, especially with the trolley. I think we've got maybe about 15 to 20 things on there, and it can range from something as small as a chocolate to something as large as like a whole cake. So it's just, you can do so much there. So it's sort of an opportunity that, as much as I loved working at Bennelong, it was just something different, and an opportunity like that I didn't think would come around very often.
Tell us a little bit about your creative process. Where does a dessert start and end? And do you have an example or two that you can take us through of your desserts that sort of typify that?
Yeah, I think with the Charles, I think the way that my mind works, I can get so excited and have crazy ideas, and so they sort of need to be honed down a bit. So I like it with the Charles because it's a European brasserie, so it has to stick within that theme and that concept, which is great. And I feel like traditionally you always want to look at French, especially with pastry, but this has sort of made me sort of branch out and be inspired by different parts of Europe, different traditional cakes that are from there, and then I can sort of make my own twist on it or make it my own sort of variation. So I think probably the most popular cake that we have is the honey cake. And that's sort of got a big trend now. But I think that it was a cake that I'd never heard of before, and I was playing around with it. There's so many sort of different recipes. I think I probably spent about 2 months working on the one that we have, just trying to get it right, trying to understand it properly. And it's absolutely delicious. It takes us 2 days to make, and then 1 day in the fridge to set before it's ready. So it's a huge process behind it, but I think everyone who's tasted it can agree that it's worth it. And it's just nice because I think everyone gets excited about it. It's tall, there's lots of layers in it, and everyone sort of loves the story behind it. So it's one of those cakes that gets everyone really excited.
At the top of the show, you mentioned something about managing that balance when you first started working in food, of that sort of life and work balance, and getting a hold of that. That's a common thing in hospitality that people grapple with, but you're also dealing with sweeter dishes and pastries, which are not necessarily healthy either. How do you get that balance, with work and in life, with food, with the areas that you're in?
Yeah, I think I've managed to sort of work out quite a good balance between everything at the moment. Being a chef isn't just a job; it is a huge part of your life, and that's just the way it goes, but you wouldn't change anything for the world. But it is just sort of, I've learned to prioritize my time very well. And, it's things like at the Charles, it's great with staff meal. We're sort of very focused on making it healthy, nutritious, sort of give you energy as you keep going throughout the day. And just trying to find that balance between having a healthy lifestyle, still trying to be sociable, as well as putting yourself into work.
It's a few moons ago that COVID sort of landed, and you were at Bennelong at the time. What was the world of hospitality like for you prior to all of this, and is it different now? And do you look for something different out of your career as a result of the last couple of years?
Yeah, I think the hospitality world was definitely one of the most affected by hospitality. I think the hospitality industry was one of the most affected by COVID. It was a scary time. I remember not being sure what was going to happen. And I think great things have come from it. I think now everything's sort of back to normal, or pretty much back to normal. And I feel like everyone's sort of changed their mindset a little bit. I feel like when you go to dine out now, it's an event. It's not just something that you sort of take for granted. So I've noticed that a lot. I feel like it's a very positive change. I think everyone appreciates just being able to go out, being able to enjoy a nice meal. I feel like I know myself, I don't really hold back anymore. It's like if I want to order 2 entrees, I will. Like I think everyone has that sort of appreciation for so many things I guess we took for granted before. And I do think that with hospitality, people just celebrate it a lot more now. I think everyone's sick of cooking at home for 2 years. So.
You had the amazing experience of working very closely with Peter Gilmore at Bennelong, and now you've got a license to really go for it at the Charles. Have you changed given that license with your approach, and what's changed?
I think maybe in some aspects. I think that I just maybe appreciate being able to cook for people more. It made me appreciate having a job to go into. And I think that, I guess, maybe not priorities have changed differently, but I think it's just brought back that passion a little bit more. It was a scary time thinking that your whole world's about to be changed. And so just being able to do what you do every day and absolutely love doing it, I think it's sort of put that fire back in a little bit.
It's starting to warm up again, and we're heading into spring and then summer. What can we expect to see, in regards to desserts at the Charles in the coming months as it does heat up?
This is sort of my favourite time to be working with produce. Going into spring, summer, I feel like there's so many exciting fruits and produce to work with. So we're going to see a lot of fresh ingredients coming back onto the trolley, a lot of light desserts. I'm working on an a la carte dessert at the moment, which I'm really excited. It's almost there. So that's going to be perfect, sort of springtime, really light and fresh. We've just done a new sort of whole changeover on the trolley, just to sort of get us through to that time. And already the mind's sort of working on what we can do next, what we can start working on. So yeah, there'll be some exciting stuff coming up.
Well, the Charles is making such an amazing impact on Sydney dining. What do you love about what you do?
I love the Charles. I think it's just one of those places where it's that very old school classic dining that you don't find that often anymore. It's not just going out for dinner. It's a whole experience. It's great to have a whole fish sort of carved and deboned at the table, the steak tartare mixed at the table. I think it's that whole theatrical element, which just really makes it special. And I just feel like it's such a great environment to be working in. Everyone's sort of excited to be delivering that service. So I think the Charles is just such a fantastic place that it's hard to compare it to a lot of other dining experiences, just because we sort of take it up that extra level.
Well, look forward to seeing what you do from here on, and it's an absolute honour to have you on Deep in the Weeds to hear just a part of your story. Please keep in touch, and we'll catch up again soon.
Thank you so much for having me.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we take a deep dive into the lives of the incredible people who ply their trade in the food and hospitality sector. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast, or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. And be well.